Time is 5:12 p.m. We are back on the road.
Okay, so Mr. Browder, you're the head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Is that right?
Yes.
And what's that devoted to?
Getting justice for Sergei Magnitsky.
And where does it get its funding?
It's a loose cooperation of individuals. It's mostly self-funded.
Self-funded, you pay for most of it.
So most people contribute their time and effort for free.
And the expenses?
The expenses aren't significant, but I pay some of them.
Do you know something called the Journalism Development Network?
No.
Operates OCCRP. You
Yeah.
aware of that?
No.
Do you make contributions to the Journalism Development Network?
No.
Never.
Never.
You've never made contributions directly or indirectly to OCCRP?
No.
How'd you come to know OCCRP?
We met them, I met them, my colleagues met them in the course of our work.
So it's just... Okay. So I'm going to mark as Exhibit 18. The return of organization exempt from income tax, Journalism Development Network, Inc. And this is for the year 2012, and it shows in 2011 it received contributions of $19,000. And in 2013, I'm looking at line 8 on the first page, received contributions of $1,015,542. You have any idea how its contributions jumped so significantly in 2012?
No.
And that's not due to any contributions you made?
I made no contributions.
And Hermitage?
No contributions.
And nobody on your team that you know of?
No.
So you have no explanation for that jump in contributions?
No.
So in 2012, the OCCRP approached Dennis Katzev. You were aware of that?
No.
You weren't aware of that?
No.
Here's my exhibit. Go on. So according to your letter, which is Exhibit 1 to the New York DA, there were transactions by Prevazone, and you list 13 of them. Well, I think I misspoke. Just a second. No, there's 13 transactions, and the last two are the ones to Prevazone.
Could you just alert me to the right page here?
Yeah, page 5.
Page 5. Page 4 or page 5?
Page 5. Well, it starts on page 4. There are a list of transactions, but the last two are transaction 15 and 16. You see that?
Yep.
And where did you get that information?
I don't know.
So then it goes acquisition of defendant's assets further down the page. Browder acquired the defendant assets on November 30, 2009. What do you mean by defendant assets?
Where is the, what reference are you?
Paragraph 16, numbered 16.
I don't know.
So you don't know how you came into information about Browder?
No.
Unit 2009 was acquired by Browder on November 30, 2009 for $1,231,148. Do you see that?
Yes.
Where did you get that information?
That information came from Bill Alpert at Barron's Magazine.
Do you know where he got it?
No.
And Unit 1810 was acquired on November 30th for $829. Did that come from Bill Alpert also?
I believe so.
How did Bill Albert become interested in Dennis Katzev?
He's a part of the OCCRP network.
Well, but how did Dennis Katzev come to the attention of the OCCRP?
I don't know.
Well, how'd they come to your attention?
I don't know.
Do you know whether this information is accurate in 17 and 18?
I don't know.
Look, this is a letter that you delivered to the New York DA personally, and you did no due diligence to see whether it was accurate?
I trusted my team.
That's totally, you trusted your team, but you did nothing yourself to understand the information and to check whether it was accurate. Is that true?
What's the question?
You did nothing yourself in the way of due diligence to determine whether this information that you're presenting to the New York DA is accurate.
My team did the due diligence and I trusted their work.
Did you ever find? So it says, as conclusion, as set forth above, Browder and its major shareholder, Denis Katzev, the son of a current serving Russian senior official, has acquired the vast corporate and personal wealth in excess of $857,000 through corrupt schemes. That's what it says, right? Paragraph 19?
Yep.
So, what were the corrupt schemes? Referred to right here, corrupt schemes.
I don't know.
You have no idea.
No.
Browder and Denis Katzev had also taken significant steps to conceal the source and ownership of their funds and assets. What significant steps did they take?
I don't know.
So you get out there and you tell the world that Denis Katzev's a crook, and you don't have any idea how he's a crook. Is that what you're telling us?
Section 4.
Could you rephrase the question, please?
You go out and you tell the world that Denis Katzev is a crook, and you have no idea what acts he committed that were crooked. Is that your testimony?
No.
Then what did he do that was crooked, in your view? Corrupt?
My team did an analysis which led to apartments being purchased using funds from the $230 million tax rebate fraud that Sergei Magnitsky uncovered. The rigor and quality of the work that my team did gave me confidence to supply our suspicions to the New York District Attorney's Office to investigate, and they chose to investigate.
Rigor and quality. What rigor did they use?
The same rigor they've used all throughout my experience with them.
So you have no idea what due diligence they do to make sure their information is accurate.
They've been doing this work for a long time, and the work that they do is high quality, and I have confidence in it.
And nobody has been prosecuted, although you've been at this for years, other than Mr. Katzev, based on the rigor and quality of your information. Is that right?
No.
Who's been prosecuted?
You had 5 different questions in your questions, so.
No, nobody has been prosecuted based upon the rigor and quality of the work of your team. 5 years of doing work?
Is your question whether anyone has been prosecuted?
Yes.
If your question is, has anyone been prosecuted?
As a result of your work.
As a result of our work, not yet.
And it's been how many years you've been at this?
Since Sergei Magnitsky was killed,
And when was that?
November 16th, 2009.
So that's 6 years now.
5.5.
And you presented to how many different prosecutors?
To the extent that that question calls for communications with government agencies that are engaged in ongoing criminal investigations that aren't public, I'm going to again request that the witness not answer it, but obviously to the extent that it's about the existence of investigations that are public, we have no objection.
You're instructing him not to answer? To be clear, I asked for the number.
Yes.
I didn't ask for names. So I don't know how the number could be privileged.
Yeah, that's fine. If it's just to the number, then you can answer.
Yes, Mr. Simrod, I understood you to be asking for the number, and if the witness knows the number, I do not have an independent objection other than what the government stated, which I understand they're withdrawing their objection to a question about the number, if the witness knows.
How many prosecutors have you submitted information to?
I don't know the exact number, more than 10.
And when your rigorous and high-quality information has been challenged in court, you've lost. Isn't that true?
No.
Well, Mr. Stepanov won in court. You already testified to that. And weren't you sued by Mr. Karpov
Yeah.
in London?
Yes.
And the judge there was highly critical of your analysis, wasn't he?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't have want a judge saying this about me, so I'll show it to you. Marking as Exhibit 19. Here's a copy. An opinion, approved judgment in the High Court of Justice, Queen's Bench Division, Royal Court of Justice, Strand, London, before Mr. Justice Simon, between Pavel Karpov and as claimant and William Felix Browder as defendants, Hermitage Capital Management Limited, Hermitage Capital Management UK Limited, Jameson Reed Firestone. Do you know what this document is?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the judgment on the libel suit.
And what did Mr. Karpov accuse you of in this lawsuit?
Libel.
In what, for what statements?
Statements made in the videos that were published on RussianUntouchables.com.
That says he had arrested, tortured, and murdered Mr. Magnitsky, right?
The statements didn't say that on the website.
Really? Well, let's see about that. Episode 2 on page 1645, that's a Bates number. In 2008, after Sergei Magnitsky testified against the same criminal group for an even larger crime, the same officers arrested, tortured, and eventually killed Sergei to hide their crime. Unless they are stopped, the same criminal group will continue to murder and steal. And it's time for the Russian government to prosecute the officers responsible for the arrest and death of Sergei Magnitsky. Major Pavel Karpov uses his position to steal, destroy lives. He's become a very rich man and believes his uniform makes him untouchable. It's time to prove him wrong. Did you make that statement in your website?
That statement was made on the Russian Untouchables video, episode 2.
That was, you were responsible for that.
Yes.
You approved it.
Yes.
So you have episode 3. Top of page 1646. Instead of stopping Sergei Magnitsky and recognizing him as a hero, the government allowed Interior Ministry officers Kuznetsov, Karpov to arrest, torture, and kill him. You said that?
No, there's 3 dots in between those words.
The court felt that this was an accurate statement of what was said?
Well, there's 3 dots there, so I didn't. The video said something more than that.
I see. But the court felt that this was an accurate, this is written by a judge, right? This opinion. Correct?
Yep.
The judge felt that was an accurate representation of what was said, correct?
No,
He did.
the judge is paraphrasing for whatever purposes.
I see. So you think the judge got it wrong?
No, I'm just saying that there's 3 dots there.
So, did you say, in words or in substance, that Karpov had arrested, tortured, and killed Magnitsky?
No,
Well, we just read it in episode 2, you said it.
no, you didn't. Should we read it again?
Yeah, we'll read it again.
In 2008, after Sergei Magnitsky testified against the same criminal group for an even larger crime, the same officers arrested, tortured, and eventually...
Slow down, it's being typed up.
Oh, sorry. And eventually killed Sergei to hide their crime. Unless they are stopped, the same criminal group will continue to murder and steal. It's time for the Russian government to prosecute the officers responsible for the arrest and death of Sergei Magnitsky. Major Pavel Karpov uses his position to steal, destroy lives. He's become a very rich man and believes his uniform makes him untouchable. It's time to prove him wrong.
So you're saying the court got it wrong when on the next page, or 1646, instead of supporting Sergei Magnitsky and recognizing him as a hero, the government allowed Interior Minister officers Kuznetsov, Karpov to arrest, torture, and kill him.
I'm saying that
So the
there's,
court got it wrong.
yes, I'm saying that there's 3 dots there. No, the court didn't get it wrong. I'm saying that you're reading out of context because there's 3 dots there and there's a longer sentence.
But this is what the court wrote. This is what the judge wrote. We're looking at a judge's opinion, right? I didn't get it wrong. You're saying the judge got it wrong when he put 3 dots there because changed the meaning according to you.
I'm not sure that the judge no, I disagree.
You disagree? What do you disagree with?
I disagree that there's 3 dots there. So if you want to use this, you should retrieve the full sentence.
I'm talking about what Judge Simon said about what you said about Mr. Karpov. And Judge Simon said, Kunetsev, Karpov, 3 dots to arrest, torture, and kill him. That's what I'm reading.
So I didn't say that. I said more words than are listed there, which is why there's 3 dots.
Alrighty. Okay, paragraph 128. Starting on 127, actually. So, 127 has your case, defendant's case, on the ill treatment and or torture of Sergei Magnitsky, correct?
Let me just read it properly. Yes, correct.
So it says that your case is, for the avoidance of doubt, it's not alleged that the claimant, which would be Mr. Karpov, personally took part in the ill treatment and or torture or killing of Mr. Magnitsky. The case against claimant is that he was, however, one of those culpable and or complicit in it because of his part in the fraud and cover-up. And then it says, it would have been reasonably foreseeable to any reasonable or blameless official in claimant's position, not least based on the high mortality rates in Russian prison, that a person in Mr. Magnitsky's position could well die in prison. Notwithstanding this, the claimant participated in his arrest and detention in the manner alleged above. Correct?
Yes.
And then the judge says, this is an unsatisfactory plea of justification for at least 2 reasons. First, it focuses on claimant's motive, and motive alone is not sufficient to support a plea of torture and murder. Second, the only overt act relied on is the claimant's involvement in the arrest and imprisonment of Sergei Magnitsky. The link which is made between the arrest and imprisonment on the one hand and Sergei Magnitsky's death on the other is that the latter was reasonably foreseeable consequence of the former, not least because of high mortality rates in Russian prison. The causal link which one would expect from such a serious charge is wholly lacking, and nothing is said about torture or murder. That's what the judge said about your statements concerning Mr. Karpov, correct?
Yes.
And yet, you continue to go around and associate people with the death of Sergei Magnitsky who were not directly involved in his death, don't you?
I believe that people I make statements about being involved in his death were involved in his death.
And you think Mr. Karpov, despite the disagreement that the judge had with you, you think Mr. Karpov is responsible.
I believe that Mr. Karpov was a member of a criminal enterprise that was responsible.
I'm asking you whether you disagree with the judge that because he arrested him, then necessarily Mr. Magnitsky was going to die. And
Well-
that's what you said.
Why don't we just read a little further in the same document? If you go to,
Why don't we answer my question? The causal link which one would expect from a serious charge is wholly lacking, and nothing is said about torture or murder. He doesn't agree that because he supposedly was the arresting officer, that he was responsible for his death, correct?
no,
The judge doesn't agree.
no, that's incorrect.
Oh, the judge agrees with you?
No, the judge doesn't. Let's repeat your question and I'll tell you
I
what
say
you're
the
doing.
judge thinks that the causal link which one would expect from such a serious charge, and the charge being that he was involved in the arrest, and therefore he was involved in the death, is wholly lacking, and nothing is said is about torture or murder. That's what the judge said. You disagree with the judge?
No.
Okay. So, in this complaint, in this case, there's a reference to the death of Mr. Magnitsky, and you've associated Mr. Katzev with the death of Mr. Magnitsky, haven't you?
No.
There was a press release. And Chev mark is Exhibit 20, the press release. Which I believe is from Hermitage on September 11, 2013, regarding the complaint. So, can you identify Exhibit 20?
Yes.
What is it?
A press release.
By whom?
A website called Law and Order in Russia.
And who issued the press release?
The Justice Campaign for Sergei Magnitsky,
Which is your organization?
which is my organization.
So you approve this press release?
I did.
It states, middle of the first paragraph, this is the first action in the U.S. to seize assets connected to the Magnitsky case, said a Hermitage Capital representative. It's a significant escalation in the campaign to bring justice for Sergei Magnitsky and his family. Sergei's families, colleagues, and friends, colleagues, and family will continue to pursue all the recipients of the blood money to make sure they are parted with the illicit proceeds, whoever and wherever they are. And the complaint you're referring to is against Prevazone Holdings, and you refer to Mr. Katzev on the second page. So you're saying Mr. Katzev received blood money from the death of Sergei Magnitsky. Is that what you're saying?
The quote in the press release is, Sergei's friends, colleagues, and family will continue to pursue all the recipients of the blood money to make sure they are parted with the illicit proceeds, whoever and wherever they are. That's exactly what was said.
Right. And you think it's appropriate to refer to blood money received by Mr. Katzev through 104 transactions over months and months, where he's denied to you that he received it and gave you a perfectly reasonable explanation for where it came from.
Objection to form.
There's
I'll
about 5
withdraw
questions
that.
there.
Yeah, well, we'll get to all 5 of them. So, you think it's appropriate to refer to Mr. Katzev as having received blood money?
I believe that the anybody who received proceeds of the $230 million tax rebate fraud, which led to the murder of Sergei Magnitsky, is blood money, and if he received that money, then he was a recipient of blood money.
You testified earlier today that you had no knowledge of facts that would show that Mr. Katzev had knowledge or intent to participate in the scheme described in the complaint. You remember that testimony?
I do.
And yet you're willing to describe what he allegedly received as blood money, implying he was involved in the death of Magnitsky.
There were 3 questions there. You want to break them down?
Were you implying with blood money that the person who received it, Mr. Katzev, was involved in the death of Mr. Magnitsky?
No.
And so what does blood money refer to?
Money from the $230 million tax rebate fraud.
The allegation, the complaint, is Mr. Katzev's company's Prevazone are conspirators, and they are responsible for the whole scheme of the $230 million. Were you aware of that?
No.
You read it. You read the complaint, didn't you?
Didn't say that they were responsible.
Of course it did.
It didn't say that.
It asked to recover the $230 million.
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to go back to the complaint. It's getting late in the day. You're telling me you didn't have any idea when you read that complaint that Mr. Katzev's companies are being accused of being responsible for the whole $230 million scheme?
Let's go back to the document.
Just tell me. You don't know it?
I'd like to see I'd like to see what you're referring to.
I'd like to not spend time on that. So you think this is an appropriate press release and an appropriate complaint referring to the Magnitsky Act? It's appropriate press release associating Mr. Katzev with blood money?
Mr. Katzev, according to our analysis and our suspicions, received a portion of the proceeds of the $230 million tax rebate fraud. That fraud, the discovery of that fraud by Sergei Magnitsky led to his false arrest, torture, and murder in prison. And therefore,
Go ahead, finish.
and therefore, the person who received that, in my opinion, would be the recipient of blood money.
Based upon your suspicions, you just said. Suspicions was the word.
That's correct.
So based upon suspicions, you broadcast to the world that Mr. Katzev is involved in the death of Mr. Magnitsky.
No,
That's adequate for your point of view.
no.
You just said that. You
No, I
said
didn't.
based upon our suspicions, he received money,
That's correct.
and therefore it's blood money, and therefore he's responsible for having blood money.
There's 3 questions there. You want to break them down?
No. You think it's perfectly appropriate, based upon suspicions, to accuse somebody of having blood money?
Could you rephrase the question, please?
No. I said, you believe, based upon suspicions, that it is a proper basis to accuse somebody of having blood money.
We had suspicions. I had suspicions. And I took those suspicions to the New York DA's office to investigate. They investigated and believed that my suspicions were credible. And on the back of that, they handed the complaint to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who also believed that our suspicions were credible based on their own investigation, and then seized the properties.
Mr. Hyman testified that the information he got was from you and Mr. Kleiner and some websites you directed him to. It was your information, and you knew that, didn't you?
Objection to form.
Let me show you another press release. Article. I'm marking it as Exhibit 21. A Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty article of September 18, 2013. Could U.S. asset seizures lead to expansion of the Magnitsky blacklist? First sentence reads, as shady Russian businessmen snapped up luxury apartments in New York City, lawyer Sergei Magnitsky was confined to the few square meters of a Moscow jail cell. He would die there under suspicious circumstances. Refers to the lawsuit and refers to Mr. Katsev as the supposedly shady Russian businessman. Do you think there is a sufficient causal link between Mr. Katsev's activities in the complaint and the death of Sergei Magnitsky?
I don't know.
Do you think it's appropriate for a U.S. government company, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, to broadcast that around the world?
I have no judgment on their journalistic standards one way or another.
You think that's an appropriate association of Mr. Katsev with the death of Mr. Magnitsky?
It's not my place to judge somebody else's
Why not?
article.
You have an opinion, don't you? Don't you have an opinion?
Yeah?
What's your opinion
About what?
about that statement? The beginning of that article.
Looks like it's based on the complaint.
And you think that's an appropriate way to interpret the complaint?
I make no judgment on this guy.
You have an opinion about whether that's an appropriate way to describe the complaint.
Without more information about his, how he was basing his article, it would be, I have no opinion.
Do you think that it is appropriate description of the complaint? That's what you said. You said it's a description of the complaint. You think that's an appropriate description of the complaint?
I don't know.
So is it fair to say that you didn't learn anything from Justice Simon's criticism that you had inadequate causal link between somebody who arrested, allegedly, Mr. Magnitsky and his death?
In paragraph 141,
I'm asking you about
And I'm-
paragraph
and-
128.
and I'm answering you with paragraph 141. In paragraph 141, Justice Simon says, I have used the expression presently.
Well, why don't you start at the beginning of the paragraph if you want to talk about 141?
Sure. Thirdly, the claimant has achieved a measure of vindication as a result of the views I have expressed in this application. Defendants are not in a position to justify the allegations that he caused or was party at the torture, death of Sergei Magnitsky, or will continue to commit.
Slow down and speak out loud.
Or to be party to.
If you want to read this, make sure people can hear it.
Would you like me to start from the
I
beginning?
would like you to start at the beginning, slow down, and speak out loud.
Thirdly, the claimant has achieved a measure of vindication as a result of the views I have expressed on his application. The defendants are not in a position to justify the allegations that he caused or was party to the torture and death of Sergei Magnitsky, or would continue to commit or be party to covering up crimes. To use the expression in Olswang's letter of the 1st of August 2012, the record, at least insofar as it is presently set out in the pleadings, has been set straight. I recognize that this will not prevent a repetition of the libel, which, in order of the court, would do, at least in this jurisdiction. However, nothing in this judgment is intended to suggest that if the defendants were to continue to publish unjustified defamatory material about the claimant, the court would be powerless to act. I have used the expression presently set out in the pleadings because I have not overlooked the possibility of an application to amend the particulars of the plea of justification to rely on participation in a broad conspiracy and/or joint enterprise.
And you feel that justifies associating Mr. Karpov, with the death of Mr. Magnitsky, what you just read.
I believe that Mr. Karpov was a member of a joint enterprise or a broad conspiracy that led to the murder and death of Sergei Magnitsky.
And you have yet to come up with a single fact that would justify that.
No, incorrect.
We're not going back over the pleadings. We're talking about this case now.
Which case?
You have gone.
Which case are we talking about? We're talking about the libel case, or
No, we're talking about this lawsuit
Okay.
against Mr. Katzev,
Right.
who's not accused of being involved in the arrest, the death, the torture, or anything else of Mr. Magnitsky. But you and the United States have associated him with that death, and you think that's appropriate.
I think that the United States government has taken a complaint that we filed, investigated it, and found a link between the crimes that Sergei Magnitsky uncovered and the purchase of property in New York, and have seized that property.
And you think it's appropriate, based upon this link of 104 transactions, to say that Mr. Katzev was associated with the death of Mr. Magnitsky?
I think it's appropriate to say that Mr. Katzev received proceeds.
No. Answer my question, not your question. Do you think it's appropriate, based upon what your investigation allegedly found, to associate Mr. Katzev with the death of Mr. Magnitsky?
Yes.
Other people will have a judgment on that. But I would suggest you've learned nothing from Justice Simon.
Is that a question?
No, it's my own editorializing. You tape conversations?
I don't personally know.
Never?
I have in the past.
In the past? How far in the past?
In specific instances where somebody is involved in something suspicious.
So have you taped any conversations in connection with your investigation of the $230 million theft from the Russian Treasury?
I haven't personally.
Do you know if anybody in your team
Has specifically taped conversations?
Yes.
I don't know.
Do you keep a calendar?
Do I keep a calendar?
Yeah, do you keep a calendar?
Yeah.
Do you keep your emails?
Yes.
Who keeps your files?
What do you mean?
Who keeps your files? Who maintains your files?
I don't understand the question.
You have files in connection with the $230 million fraud. Who maintains them?
People doing the investigation.
Who's that?
My lawyers and Vadim Kleiner.
You don't keep anything yourself?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Not a shred?
No.
Except the emails?
Yeah.
It's alleged in the complaint and the amended complaint that when Mr. Katzev was approached by a reporter about the funds that was in the Prevazone Holdings account, that he said he had received them from an investor. You're aware of that?
Could you show me the line?
Let's go to the amended complaint.
Exhibit 14.
So it's paragraph 108 and 109. Says the money that came in February of 2008, and I'm paraphrasing here, from Bunakan and LNS derived from a deal between Mr. Critt and his friend Mr. Petrov. You see that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Let me read from page 41, paragraph 108. First full sentence. Representative 1 stated that the funds involved in the February 2008 Bunakan LS transfers derived from a deal between Mr. Critt and his friend, a Mr. Petrov. You see that?
Yes.
So the 2008 Bunakan LNS transfers are the ones that your investigation claimed were from the Russian fraud, right?
I don't know.
Well, you can look at Exhibit B.
Exhibit B?
Yes, to this complaint,
Yep.
which, by the way, is similar to Exhibit 1, the chart that you showed us.
Which document is that?
Well, let's go to your chart, okay, which is Exhibit 1, the letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Exhibit 1?
This letter to U.S. right on top.
This one. Which tab?
7.
Okay.
So this is your information.
Yep.
You have transfers of $410,000, $447,000 in February 2008 from Bunakan and LNS, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's what Representative 1 was talking about, February 2008 Bunakan and LNS transfers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
I'm sorry? I don't...
All right. So Representative 1, on behalf of Mr. Katsev, says that those transfers came from a deal between Mr. Petrov and Mr. Critt. Right? That's what the complaint says.
That's what it says, yes.
Okay. And you had that information before the complaint was filed, right?
No.
You had that information actually before you even made the complaint to the U.S. Attorney's Office, didn't you?
I don't know.
Did you ever investigate whether it was true that the 2008 transfers came from a Mr. Petrov?
I didn't personally.
Did anybody?
I don't know.
Don't you think it's reasonable, if there's an explanation, to investigate the explanation?
If in general terms, yes.
Okay. And so we have, according to your chart, $20 million of clean money going into Bunakan LNS, $800,000 coming out. Don't you think it's possible that that was clean money that came out?
I don't know.
Don't you think it's possible that Mr. Katsev's explanation that it came from a Mr. Petrov is a reasonable explanation when there's $20 million of clean money going through those accounts at the same time?
I don't know.
You have no opinion about that.
I just don't know.
You're willing to accuse Mr. Katzov of having blood money, but you don't know whether it's reasonable to think that the $800,000 came from clean money. Is that your testimony?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. You don't think that, you don't know whether you should check whether the 410 and the $447,000 came from Mr. Petrov as a reasonable explanation, a reasonable and innocent explanation for the transfers from Bunicon and Elenis.
I don't know when that information came, and I don't know whether the people who did the tracing had that information.
No, they had the information before this complaint was filed. This is in the original complaint also. Should we look at paragraph in the original complaint? This is before the complaint was filed. Exhibit 2, the original complaint.
Where am I looking?
Looking at,
Are you talking about the complaint that we filed with New York
no,
DA's office?
this is the United States complaint against Prevazone.
Which exhibit number is this?
I think it's 2.
Wait for a second, I need to find this. Would this be Exhibit 2? It doesn't have a number. It doesn't have a sticker on it.
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
Let's put a sticker on it. Hmm? So, Exhibit 2, the original verified complaint, paragraph 108.
Okay.
It's the same statement in 108. Representative 1 stated the funds involved in the February 2008 transfer derived from a deal between Mr. Critt and his friend, Mr. Petrov.
So what's the question?
So this information came from your team?
The Petrov story?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, it came from the OCC RP.
So I don't see it in here. Is it? Can you show me it in here where that statement is?
I don't think it's in there.
So how did it come from me?
It came from the OCC PR that you gave to the U.S. Attorney.
No, the OCC RP gave us information, not the other way around.
Yes, and then you gave it to the U.S. Attorney. So you had from the OCC RP this quote from Representative 1.
I'm not sure that's the case. I don't believe, not to my knowledge.
You think it would have been irresponsible to make a complaint against Prevazone without checking out the explanation given by Representative 1?
I don't know. I haven't assessed that
Well,
statement.
let's assess it right now. You have $20 million going through an account, $800,000 coming out, and the person whose accounts received the money says, I have a perfectly good explanation. It came from Mr. Petrov. And you don't think it's your obligation, before you accuse him of having blood money, to check out his story?
I'm not sure we have that information.
Obviously had it because it's in the complaint, the very first complaint.
It's not in this complaint.
Mr. Hyman says that he got information for this complaint from you and Mr. Kleiner and some websites you directed him to. So you had the information.
I don't, not to my knowledge.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's assume that you are aware of this explanation. Would it be irresponsible not to check it out before making a complaint against Mr. Katz's companies?
I can't make a judgment about some piece of information taken out of context.
It's perfectly well in context. It is his explanation for the $800,000. It's not obvious to you that you ought to check it out?
I don't believe we have that information, not to my knowledge,
Well,
because I don't see it in. I don't see that in this document.
after this was filed, you had the information because you had the complaint. As a matter of fact, you had the complaint before it was filed. So you would have read it in the drafts. So you had the information. Did you check it out?
I don't know.
Did you think you had an obligation to check it out?
I don't know.
It's not obvious to you if there's an innocent explanation. You don't accuse somebody of having blood money.
The U.S. Attorney's Office have kept it in 2 complaints, so obviously they believe that it's true.
Did you ever try to reach Mr. Petrov?
No, not to my knowledge. I didn't personally.
Did anybody in your team attempt to reach Mr. Petrov?
I don't know.
Who's Mark Fagan?
He's a Russian lawyer.
You know him?
No.
Didn't you come to the United States with him when you were touring with Pussy Riot?
No.
Do you have anything for children? You know what the Pussy Riot is?
Of course.
What is it?
It's a punk rock band.
What's the significance of it in Russia?
Anti-Putin. They're an anti-Putin punk rock band.
Did you support the Pussy Riot in any way?
I took them to meetings on Capitol Hill.
And wasn't Mark Fagan there also?
Not with us.
You've never met Mark Fagan?
I've shaken his hand at a event in London, public event.
When was that?
It was 2013, November of 2013, I think. I'd have to ask some people to remember.
What event was it?
I think it was a book launch event for a book about Sergei Magnitsky.
Not your book.
No.
Another book.
Yeah.
Do you have Mr. Fagan's telephone number?
No.
So, are you familiar with a lawyer by the name of Oleg Lurie?
No.
You've heard about, I'm sorry, it's not I said lawyer.
You did.
Too many lawyers. A reporter by the name of Oleg Lurie.
Yes.
How do you know Mr. Lurie?
I don't.
Well, you said in a pleading in this court that he was pursuing you for years. Remember saying that?
I remember saying that.
Pursuing you in what way?
There's a documentary that the Russian government made about me in which Oleg Lurie is one of their principal detractors.
That was in 2014.
I think that was last year. I can't remember exactly when. Could have been this year.
And you say it was the Russian government who put that out? You're just assuming that, right?
I'm assuming that, yes.
Okay. You don't know who put it out.
No. Well, I know it was the Russian government, excuse me. I do know.
How do you know that?
Because it was put on the Russian government's television station, NTV.
So this program was on Russian government TV.
Correct.
Do you know if they put together the video?
I don't know how it was constructed.
Okay, you said Mr. Lurie was pursuing you for years. That's just recently. How has he been pursuing you for years?
I'd have to go back and do a search. I'm sure we could find something.
In other words, you put it in an affidavit to Judge Grisey, but you don't have anything to say he was pursuing you for years?
Not at the tip of my tongue.
And you didn't at the time you wrote that and signed the affidavit, right?
I'm sure I did at the time.
But you can't recall it now.
No.
It's just what, a month or two ago?
Yeah.
So did you have notes that you could review to see how Mr. Lurie has been pursuing you for years?
I could do the research to come up with them.
Well, you can go back and do research to support a statement that you swore to before and present it to Judge Grisey, right? Do you have anything at the time?
I don't have any notes.
So you just said it.
I said it based on my belief at the time.
Do you have any facts that support your belief?
Not on the tip of my tongue.
And you didn't have any at the time, right?
Wrong.
But you don't remember them now.
Right.
Did you go out and check Mr. Lurie's accusation? Did you do any investigation about Mr. Lurie's accusation that somebody used your name to attempt to bribe him to change his story about Sergei Magnitsky?
It's complete nonsense.
You did? Did you do any investigation?
My team did. It's complete nonsense.
What investigation did your team do?
They compared his statements with the facts and came up with a conclusion that it was nonsense.
And what facts did they compare it to?
I don't know.
It's easy to say it's nonsense. Do you have any facts to support that statement?
My team does.
But you have no idea, and you can't tell us here, what facts would support the idea that Mr. Lurie's accusation is nonsense?
I don't remember exactly what his accusation was, and I don't remember exactly what their rebuttal was, but I trust my team to do the analysis.
Mr. Lurie said that somebody using your name contacted him. He produced recordings of those conversations. People using your name offered him $160,000 to change his story about meeting Sergei Magnitsky in jail.
It's a lie.
And how do you know it's a lie?
Because I never gave anyone any money to do anything of the sort.
He never took the money. He turned it down.
I never instructed anybody to do anything of the sort.
Did you investigate whether Mr. Lurie was in prison at the same time as Mr. Magnitsky?
He's a convicted ex-convict that spent 4 years in jail for extortion. And then he came and lied about this thing.
I see. So, you investigated whether he had been in prison. Was he in prison at the same time as Mr. Magnitsky?
I don't know the details of his imprisonment.
Did you check whether his prison term overlapped with Mr. Magnitsky?
No.
And nobody on your team did.
My team did a full analysis.
They write it down?
I don't know.
So what was this full analysis?
They looked at his allegations and looked at the facts and concluded it was complete nonsense, his statements about his knowledge of Sergei Magnitsky.
Can you give me any facts that would support that very easy statement to say that it's nonsense? Do you have any facts?
To support which part of this statement?
Any part of the statement?
Well, the first fact is that I've never bribed or authorized anyone to bribe anybody in relation to him or anything to do with him, and I can say that with 100% certainty. That's a fact.
Did you check whether anybody, did you check whether he was in prison at the same time, in the same prison as Mr. Magnitsky?
I didn't personally.
Do you know whether anybody in your team did?
Yes.
And they discovered what?
That his statements were inconsistent with the truth.
In what way?
I'd have to ask them to repeat the details. I don't know.
So you didn't get briefed on the details of an accusation that you had bribed a witness to change his testimony. Does that say you never got briefed on this?
I was briefed on it, but I don't remember the details.
When were you briefed on it?
Whenever it happened.
It happened just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You were briefed on it a few weeks ago, and you have no specifics to tell us.
That's correct.
When you met with Mr. Kasyanov, did you talk to him about Mr. Lurie?
No.
Do you know whether Mr. Kasyanov is attempting to bring a claim against Mr. Lurie?
I read that on the internet.
Where did you read that?
On the internet.
Where on the internet?
Some news article.
You can't tell me more than that?
No.
Did you investigate anything about Mr. Lurie's background?
No.
Did you investigate his reporting?
No.
Did you investigate whether he's won awards in the West for his reporting?
No.
So you're unaware of any of that?
Unaware. Yes, I'm unaware.
Okay. You're not aware that he has spent many years trying to determine how the IMF money that went into Republic National Bank in 1998 ended up stolen.
I wasn't aware of that.
Mr. Saffer was your partner and he owned the bank, right?
Correct.
And you're unaware that Mr. Lurie was looking into that?
That's correct.
Has the U.S. Attorney's Office asked you about Mr. Lurie's affidavit?
No.
Has anybody in the government asked you about Mr. Lurie's affidavit?
No.
Well, Mr. Lurie says that he had 2 meetings with Sergei Magnitsky while they were in prison, right?
I don't know.
Didn't you read his affidavit?
No.
You didn't even read it?
No.
Isn't it true that Mr. Magnitsky turned down legal assistance from you?
No.
He always accepted your legal assistance?
Yes.
So you provided him with lawyers?
His firm did, and we reimbursed them.
Firestone Duncan.
Correct.
They would periodically provide him with statements, provide Mr. Magnitsky with statements that he should sign.
Who?
Firestone Duncan, or his lawyers hired by Firestone Duncan.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Did you consult with Mr. Magnitsky's lawyers from time to time?
No.
Somebody on your team do that?
Possibly, I don't know.
People at Firestone Duncan would have, right?
Surely.
Did you have Brown Rudnick representing you at the time?
No.
So Firestone Duncan was your lawyers at the time?
Not the only ones. We had other lawyers.
So did anybody coordinate on your behalf with Firestone Duncan about the defense of Mr. Magnitsky?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't remember.
You were being criminally prosecuted along with Mr. Magnitsky at that time. You didn't pay attention?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Did you ever have somebody suggest to Mr. Magnitsky that he should take responsibility for the Saturn and Dahlia Step tax returns?
I don't remember.
Why don't we take a break?
Time is 6:24 p.m. We are off the record. Time is 6:34 p.m. We are back on the record.
I asked you about taping. We talked about specific taping, but does Hermitage have a taping system for taping incoming and outgoing calls, generally for regulatory purposes or otherwise?
Yes.
And how long do you keep those tapes?
I don't know the details.
Do you know whether those tapes have been searched for any relevant conversations?
I don't know.
All right. As we discussed off the record, we have 12 minutes left or something on the 7 hours. We believe we're entitled to many additional documents, and we also have insufficient time to finish another major subject. So what we're going to do is suspend the deposition at this point. We're going to reserve our right to ask the judge for additional time once we get the documents, and keep the deposition open.
Okay. Well, I disagree. I think, for the record, we offered to reschedule the deposition at the defendant's convenience if they felt it was necessary. The defendants wanted to proceed, as was their right, so we showed up here. I think regardless whether you wanted to ask more questions about other documents, you chose to ask approximately 6 hours and 48 minutes worth of questions about the documents you had, and I think it's improper to make a witness from England try to sit for another deposition over 12 minutes. So we're willing to sit here for another 12 minutes if you wish, but I think anything else is improper. So
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, and I understand the government has no questions. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, so we're going to reserve our rights. There's no point in arguing. As we both know, the judge will decide whatever he decides. So thank you, Mr. Browder, for coming, and we'll expect another session.
All right. Have a good evening.
Yes, you too.
Time is 6:36 p.m. We are off the record.